here's my thought on whether the settlement's going to impact prices. I think because there's been so much news about this that's came out, the headline, the soundbite that is everywhere is something to the effect of this: that settlement comes out that eliminates buyer commission. That's basically the summary of what a lot of the things have said. Now, is that true?
In this episode, I talked with Trevor Mauch. He is the host of the CarrotCast podcast and the CEO of Carrot.com, a lead generation platform for real estate investors and agents. Carrot has been recognized by Inc. magazine as one of the nation's fastest growing companies. Over the past 5 years, Trevor has helped real estate professionals in generating over 3 million online leads and successfully closing thousands of deals. He's deeply enthusiastic about aiding entrepreneurs in realizing their business dream that positively impacts their freedom, flexibility, and finances. We discussed the bombshell NAR settlement, how that's going to impact realtors, investors, and the industry at large, and how you can make sure that you emerge as a winner in this new era of real estate. Hope you enjoy. Now on to the show. How you doing, Trevor?
Chris, I'm pumped to be on here with you, man. I'm
You too.
pumped.
You too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been fun watching you from afar, by the way, just through everything you're doing with the agent investor side of things, with EXP, but also, man, like the way you push yourself, you physically, all that kind of stuff. I love just the way you show up and your energy. So I'm pumped to be on here with you.
Thanks. Yeah, I always try to, like, if you're not growing, you're dying.
Yep.
So I, I I read a book a while back and basically just kind of sums up the way I've always lived my life is I create some obscene goal that there's a strong likelihood I'm probably not even going to reach it. But it's that growth in the process that really matters. And more often than not, I actually end up doing it because, like, hey, you're in it. You might as well like be all in it. So yeah, that's kind of what I've done.
Love it, man. Love it. Love it.
All right. So, hey, well, we were chatting a little bit online about this whole bombshell that kind of happened, news that's happened recently, and wanted to bring you on to talk about it. But it's related to the NAR settlement, this huge like landmark settlement, and they've got a lot of problems going on, and a lot of things are changing. But before we get into that, like, why should realtors and why should real estate investors listen to you?
Dude, amazing question. So, 2004, I bought my first rental property, literally no money down. And that got me into the real estate side of things. But ever since then, dude, what I've really focused on and became passionate about was the marketing side. And so today, I was looking at the stats the other day. Our clients bring in tens of millions of visitors, house sellers, mostly motivated house sellers, buyers, land sellers, mobile home notes, the whole thing, and millions of leads every single year through our platform. And so we get this unique vantage point of how the market's shifting and adjusting, but also it's really how the consumer is changing their patterns. How are they searching? How are they finding the solutions? What do they actually want? And through that time, working with 7,000 investors and agents, that's how many clients we have today that we work with. We get access to vantage points that most people don't. So I'm pumped to be able to see it from a macro vision and then distill down to what are like the micro tactics that you do.
Yeah, and that's why I think this conversation will be interesting and very relevant for a lot of folks. And you have a unique perspective.
Mm.
So a lot of the perspectives that you're seeing in the comments and the threads on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook, it's polar. And it's heated too. You've got on one side, you've got consumers that I suspect most of those are ignorant on what actually is going on. But they have an opinion, and it's a valid opinion. And then on the other side, you've got agents that may be a little blind to how consumers feel. So what are your thoughts on this NAR settlement, this $418 million settlement, which is a big cut down from the billion and plus damages that was being sought by the prosecutors?
Dude, so there's a few big dynamics here, man. So the first one is I've heard a lot of people saying, a lot of real estate agents saying nothing much is going to change, right? You keep on seeing comments where it's like, well, big whoop, like we've already been doing a lot of that in Washington, or we'll change the wording on our listings from this to this and we'll still be able to do it. So at the highest level, I believe there is truth to that, right? I believe that there, in many respects, there's going to be a hunk of things structurally about the real estate transaction that won't change a lot. What I really feel that people are missing in general, not everybody, but the general, people who are talking about, whether it's the consumer or the investor or the agent, in general, everyone's thinking about themselves. Okay, the agent is looking at this going, "Oh shoot, how am I still going to be able to make money doing this?"
Oh yeah.
Okay, the investor's looking at this going, okay, oh my gosh, I see this as an opportunity for me. The seller and the buyer's looking at this going, the seller's going, oh, cool, sweet. Now it's a permission for me to not have to pay commission. And the buyer's going, I don't know how it impacts me. Like, what do I need to do? Right? I think a lot of the buyers are still trying to figure this out. And it won't really hit buyers until they're actually faced with the decision of making a decision of how this is getting paid for. And then really recognizing the value in a good buyer's agent, right? So I think buyers are the ones who we still need to see how that's going to happen. But at the highest level, everyone's thinking about themselves. And I think what we need to do on the professional side of it, with the investor side and the agent side primarily, is we need to pull back and say, why is this even happening in the first place? Okay, why is it happening in the first place? And what can we do about this to move towards the future? And the future is always going to follow the path of least resistance for the consumer.
Yep.
Okay, so if you're an investor, or if you're an investor or an agent, you need to look straight for the consumer and say, I've got to completely eliminate what I think is best for me or what I think is best for the consumer. I need to ask, what do they actually want? And at the end of the day, we've been talking about this for 7 years at Carrot. At the end of the day, if I were to talk to 100 house sellers, okay, I'm going to go house sellers first. It I'm making up a number here, right? But if I were to talk to 100 house sellers, I'm pretty confident if I were to ask them this question I'm about to say, that probably 98 out of 100 would say, it would give a certain answer. So if I were to ask those sellers and say, hey, do you want to list your house on the market with an agent and pay a commission? Or would you rather sell your house more quickly for cash for a fair price for you? Almost every one of them are going to say, dude, if it was a fair price, of course I'd want to do that. I don't want to hassle with all this other stuff over here.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you know that that's where the consumer's going, that they're like, they just want the simplest solution to solve it. They don't care about the MLS. They don't care about those things. The reason that they think of those things is because that's what's been ingrained in the industry for the last 40 years. That's the way you sell a house, right? But that's all been changing the last 5 to 7 years with iBuyers coming in and other solutions to make it easier for someone to buy or sell a home. Now, the other 5 or the other 3 that would not say yes, that's what I'd rather do to sell quickly for a fair price, it's probably because their Aunt Betsy's an agent and they feel bad about not selling through Aunt Betsy, right? And now, am I right in that, Chris? I don't know. That's my opinion, but here's the rub in it. There might be a lot of agents.
Wait, before you get there, you
Yep.
are right, because everything will always go towards the consumer over time.
Yep.
It's
Exactly.
just, but I mean, eventually, if it's not being forced, which this is being forced, the marketplace will gravitate towards that. Now,
Yep.
both kind of was happening here. We had the marketplace moving towards that. Technology was allowing that to happen, and then it was finally forced by some lawyers who got a nice payday out of it. But at the end of the day, like, it happened.
Yep. And I don't think this even could have happened 15 or 20 years ago, right? So when we look at, well, why did it happen now? So let me kind of go into, if you're cool with it, how industries mature. Okay, so where a lot of people are thinking about this, the NAR settlement, is they're thinking about it way at the micro. They're saying, how does it impact me as an agent? How does it impact me as an investor? How does it impact me as a seller, me as a buyer? Okay, but what if we go way upstream and say, how do we even get here in the first place? And are there other cues or other industries that have gone through something similar? And what can we learn from those other industries to know what's next? And how do we need to pivot? And how do we need to then find the next new opportunity? Okay. So markets, and I'm not talking market cycles. I'm not talking real estate market cycles in every 8 to 10 year cycle. I'm not talking economic cycles and the reset that usually happens every 20 to 30 years on the economy. I'm not talking those. Okay. Or even like, you read the book Principles, or no, it's a world, I think it's a New World Order or something like that by Ray Dalio.
Yeah.
He talks about world power cycles, right? And I think that one's like every 200 to 300 years, the world power shifts and changes. The same thing happens for industries. Okay. So if we go all the way back to the real estate agent industry or brokerage industry and when it started. In the 1800s, it was literally the Wild West, right? It was literally the Wild West, but also real estate was the Wild West. If you wanted to sell a property, what do? I mean, you go to talk to a buddy or a neighbor, or you might trade something, or you go down to the saloon and say, we got to move, got to sell this thing. And it's a Wild West.
I'll give you a dozen horses for 50 acres.
Yeah, something. And so what happened was the market saw that there's a problem here. And that problem started to get bigger as people moved out west, as the population boomed more in America. People saw an opportunity to say, hey, people are getting more mobile. Okay. Once people became more mobile with trains and stagecoaches and people moving all around the place, what happened? People wanted to move more often. Okay, the need now happened. Before people were mobile, they literally lived in that cabin for 70 years until they passed away. Okay, but the world became, or the US became more mobile. It created the need for selling properties because people now lived in 2, 3, 4 houses during their lifetime. So people saw that opportunity. In the early 1900s, what happened was you had your first like brokerage or brokers start, I think it was between 1910 and 1917. Okay, that was around there. But in 1900 through 1910, 12, there was a real problem that happened. The problem that started to happen as I was diving into my research is you would literally hear someone say that they were wanting to sell their house and move. And it was crazy. There would be 5, 10, 15 signs that these rogue real estate agents, before real estate agents were actually an industry, would plant a sign on that person's lawn without permission. Like there's tons of documentation on this. So that started to create this issue where it's like, we've got to regulate this thing, okay? Because this is not good for the consumer. So that's where the first brokerages started. Your first regulations, I think, happened in 1917. And then through 1917 through the 30s, it was just still kind of this Wild West thing. It was in a new industry phase. Okay, industries move through these phases. It's new growth, then there's shakeout, then there's mature, and then there's the decline. Okay, now I'm going to talk about where I think that we are today. Now, it doesn't mean it's proof of where we are. I'll tell you where I think we are. So new, growth, shakeout, mature, decline. Okay, so 1910 through the 30s was a new market. It's slow growth. There's high prices in there because people are still trying to figure it out. Low awareness of that there's even real estate agents that exist, and it's a big investment to get the thing started. Okay, and then what happened was World War II ended. Big housing boom comes, right? All the wartime heroes, they come back. That's where your developments and suburbs start to blow up. And that's when the real estate agent industry really started to take hold. That's where the growth phase hit.
I think there was a lot of financing options that were created then too, because before that, I mean, you would just pay, $3,000 cash for a house, $5,000 cash for a house. And afterwards, then they came out with, I guess what we now know as mortgage. They weren't 30-year mortgages back then, but they were loans.
Yeah, and that's when like the real consumerism kind of started to take hold in America anyway. Okay, there was some extra money. It was a post-wartime boom. Everybody wanted the American dream, and the American dream partially was owning a home, right? And so tons of homes were built, tons of homes were bought, high demand. During that time, they were starting to be able to optimize their businesses a little bit, and because the demand was so high, profits as a real estate agent started to grow there. They started to go, hey, this is a viable business. I can actually go do this thing and make a living doing this. Prices started to kind of set a little bit more. Maybe I'll remove the word set because that's part of the settlement. Prices started to become a little bit more standard. And there's still not a ton of competition there because it was decently new still. So that I feel was like the 40s through the 60s. Okay. So now the 60s and these ranges are my opinion from my research, but then the shakeout started to happen, the first real kind of shakeout, okay? Because you had a good number of people pile in to become agents during that 20-year period. And now the shakeout, I feel was like the 70s through the early, maybe late 80s, okay? The first kind of shakeout. Slow growth started to kind of slow down because a lot of people piled in during those 20 years to become a real estate agent. Some things were standardized with brokerages and multi-agent brokerages. High competition by this time because a bunch of people went in. The big building boom of the late 40s into the 50s and 60s started to slow down a little bit more. Your interest rates started to kind of spike up in the 70s. You had the oil and gas crisis in the 70s. And so it made some things harder. So profits started to get squeezed. There was a big shakeout of the industry. I think we're going through another shakeout right now, this last few years. So then you start to move into a mature market. Now, I'll toss it back to you here in a second, but I want to guide people through this because I think when we know how industries work, we can then know what's next, and then we can plan for that. So then the market gets mature. Okay, you had a little bit of a shakeout. Now we're 40, 50 years into this thing. We're starting to kind of figure out some regulations, some ways that things happen. The MLS started to kind of pop up in this era, and technology started to accelerate this to make it easier to have share of information. So your 1990s, especially through, let's say, 2020, I feel around there is when I feel that this industry really matured, like really matured. Okay, business, that it's where like that business or that way of doing things kind of becomes the default, right? And so so 10, 15 years ago, even 20, 30 years ago, it's like you want to sell a house, you go to an agent. That was the default thing, right? And so little growth happens during this phase. Consolidations start to happen. You start to see big brokerages and big businesses start to consolidate together a little bit. And there's a high barrier of entry. You want to start a big brokerage, it's a little bit harder to do that, in the last 10, 15 years than it was 60, 70 years ago. And this, Chris, is where the real rubber meets the road. Technology starts to catch up with the industry and it disrupts it. Okay. So when you look at the auto industry, people were just fine moving back and forth with train and stagecoach for decades, decades and decades and decades. Okay. It wasn't until technology finally caught up with the inefficiency. Because what was wrong with trains and stagecoaches? Well, trains, it's only going to take me on this one path. I got to get out of the train, got to get into something else and go actually get to the actual location. So it's inefficient. It's inconvenient. Autos, stagecoaches, it's bumpy. I've got horses over here. I've got to feed the horses. I've got to do this. It's dusty. There's all these things that are inconvenient for the consumer. All of a sudden now I can solve the problem of going a short or long distance in more comfort without having to have a horse and deal with all that stuff. And I could go from point A to point B, door to door. Technology finally caught up with the inefficiency. You can look at the same thing for the stock market. Okay, the stock market, in order to make a purchase in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, early 80s for a stock, you had to physically call a broker. You had your broker, Johnny. I had to pick up the phone, call Johnny, place my order. Then there was this big crisis in the mid to late 80s. I think it was 87 or 88, where things melted down. Technology hadn't caught up where a consumer could go place their own stock trade. So things are tanking. I'm trying to call Johnny. 100 other people are also calling Johnny. Johnny doesn't answer my call. I lose my retirement. Bunch of regulation happened right after that. And technology had finally caught up with the inefficiency. And that's when your E-Trades, your Charles Schwabs, those came up. Okay, one last thing that I'll toss over to you, Chris, is what happens when we hit the end of that mature market and technology catches up with the inefficiency and we move towards the decline phase of that previous way the industry operated. Well, in the stock world, we'll use that example again. The stockbroker, Johnny, he had a couple choices. He had choice A, which was to be mad and upset and say, hey, I used to be able to do these trades for you guys, and now my livelihood's going away and I can complain about it and all these things. Okay, Johnny's eventually going to go out of business and he's going to have to go find something new. Option B is literally, I just go find something new right now, then my next new opportunity, right? Option C is I can go, okay, what's next then? Like, let's say now that people can go buy their own stock, there's probably a lot of people who don't know what stocks to buy and they're not comfortable buying their own stock and they need some guidance and they need some help. What happened over the next 30 years, Chris, in the stock world? The smart people pivoted to a more service-based business with something the technology couldn't solve. It pivoted towards all of your designations came up, registered investment advisor, certified financial planner, like all those credentials, those all came up post 1985. Over the last 30 to 40 years, that industry became just as big, if not bigger, than the previous one. Okay, so we're at the same spot I feel with real estate. Technology the last 5 to 7 years finally caught up with the inefficiencies. Me as a buyer, when we were buying our last house, the one before, I would have much rather pulled up an app and been able to click some things and literally went myself with my wife and drove to the house, not had an agent have to kind of walk me around and kind of do the awkward stand and lurk back here. And like, I would much rather go and just look at the house myself and go click the thing. It opens up this thing and I can get in there. It tracks that it's me. So it's safe for the seller. I can walk around. I can do whatever. I leave the house. It maybe sends me a message. Hey, how did you like it? Put in your things and what you like, what you didn't like. Do you want to have a conversation with the seller? That's what I would rather do. Then once I get to the spot where I wanted to then make an offer, I get to choose. Hey, do I need some help? Yeah, I do. Let me get my agent involved now. right? So that's where there's a lot of inefficiencies technology's already started to take care of, but I think it's only the beginning.
I,
And now
you
we're
know, I agree. So, and I've been talking about this a lot, mostly
Mhm.
from the investor angle, but real estate by and large has been immune or it held on and stayed resistant to technological changes and disruption for longer than most other industries.
Yeah,
Not all, I don't know all industries, but most other industries. Stocks, travel, and all this other stuff, like they were quick to go.
yep,
Um, Not real estate. And that's
yep,
because there's a lot more moving parts. It's very local. There's a lot of regulation involved. So real estate, by and large, has been very resistant
yeah.
to
Bigger
change.
dollar amounts.
Well,
So
that was
there's
one of the things I liked about EXP. Like, they were one of the like an early adapter
Mhm.
to at least within the brokerage model on changing into a technological era and having a cloud-based brokerage. It was very unique for them. Zillow saw a gap, but even still, it was very, even if you look at DXP's like growth chart, it was very, very, very slow
Yep.
until it was like 2014, 2015 or so. Zillow, very slow. And
Hmm.
then it just took off. So I think we're kind of seeing a pivotal moment with real estate. Now we got the iBuyers and you get the Redfins and the Compass and the EXP, and there's all this other stuff coming out from a systems standpoint. Now we've got AI. So
Yep.
I've made this argument, and let me know what your thoughts are. The information, like the one big thing about real estate is local information,
Mm.
crime, school, walking scores, resources around it, neighborhoods, traffic, and then this, and then of course property data.
Hmm.
Almost all that information is available on a public resource.
Yep.
If
Yep.
so, then the ability to go into Chat GPT or whatever the next evolution of that is and get a quick score on almost like a Carfax,
Mm.
um, a score on every single piece of information that you could possibly need to know about a particular house within seconds.
Yep.
I mean, that it's not that that's not possible. That will happen.
Oh yeah. Yep. For
So
sure.
that there's a lot of workload that right now agents provide through experience
Hmm.
and through certain like gate you know gatekeeper resources that they have access to
Yep.
provide that. That's opening up. It's going
Yep.
to change. And I get that agents may be scared about that.
Yeah.
But that's coming. That is going to
It is.
impact way more than what the settlement will happen.
Hmm.
What the settlement do.
Dude, 100%. And I think a couple of the big opportunities, because I don't want to be doom and gloom for agents. I think
No,
what I want to
I'm
make
gonna
sure,
back him up here in a minute, but
dude,
because
I love it.
I'm an agent. I've never been the
Exactly.
traditional agent. Always an investor, but I get what they do, and I didn't have my respect for what they do went 10x once I got my license and realized all the crap they have to deal
Yeah.
with. So I do respect but I'm pretty agnostic. Like it is what
Yep.
it is, and like at the end of the day, there's a transaction. Like you said, consumer doesn't care. They need to get from point A to point B, which means I got a house, I need to sell it, or I don't have
Yep.
a house, I need to buy a house, and the least possible friction involved in that they will take as long as it meets their goal.
Exactly. And I think where the rub is, Chris, and this is for investors too, is going all the way back to what I had mentioned at the start, where, you know, you talk to a seller, would they rather list it on the market with the MLS and all that goes with that, or receive a fair cash offer that they deem as fair and be able to close quickly and leave it as is? Almost all of them are going to choose that. The rub is fair, right? And I think that's where there's that difference is Open Door kind of came in the middle and they said, hey, we're gonna give a investor like offer, right? A cash offer, but we're going to try to bring it closer to retail prices. And that's always been the issue with the average wholesaler flipper is they're going in with that calculation because they need to, because you got to have the profit margin. They don't have the giant ecosystem that Open Door does and all the back end things that actually is where they make their profits with title and other things like that. So the investor comes in with their 65 cents on the dollar, 70 cents on the dollar, 85 cents on the dollar offer, because you have to be able to make a profit. You're in business, right? And so the gap there is is with the direct purchasing of a property for cash, the word fair differs by seller. It differs by their situation. And so I think there's always going to be the majority of people who are just totally fine waiting a little bit to get the most money. And I think that's what's going to be interesting to figure out. Are we going to see your iBuyers like an Open Door or those types of things really gobble up the market share? And or the big brokerages really start to shift towards having that be a primary part of the actual real estate agent experience. They're all starting to, right? EXP's got express offers, which is partnered with Open Door or something. But I think that's going to be a standard part of the real estate sale transaction moving forward.
Yeah, and that's how I'll back up, agent. So, story time.
Yep.
So when I knew him from a private organization locally. He was also a sheriff and he was running for constable. So I know him. He's also running for a pretty important position locally. He was like, hey, got this rental property, need to sell it. And I know you buy houses. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I could buy it. Like, just let me list it for you. I'll list it. It'll sell quickly. And he was like, no, I don't want to list it. I'm like, so like, I know you. I'm going to go extra. Like I layered disclosures down like 3X. I'm like, look, I mean, I can totally buy it, but look, dude, you're going to make like $34,000 more. Just let me list it for you. He was like, no, I don't want to deal with it. I just want it sold. This is someone I knew.
Yeah.
I bought it. Turnkey rental. It was a newer property with a tenant that was paying, and we bought it cash flow day one. And they were great tenants. They weren't bad tenants. It wasn't like it was a headache for him. It was just he didn't want to worry about it because he was running for constable, and that was his focus. Now, most agents don't understand that because they don't understand these other options. So I've always said, like, agents need tool belt. They need tools in their tool belt. They need to understand that certain sellers don't care about maximum profit or selling at maximum price. They just want a good solution for them. So fair market value is relative. It's relative to what someone would pay, but also what someone's willing to sell it for. If I don't want to sell it for max profit because that has extra friction, then that's not really a good solution for me. So going back to what you're talking about, maturing economies or maturing industries and like stocks and all that, and how you have these certain designations. I mean, there's varying degrees of it. Some of them are coaches. They're more educators. Others will be more hand holding. And I like what Tom Ferry says. He's like building moat around your business. And this is what I've talked to both on the investor side and the agent side. Like, if you want to protect your business, you need a niche. Like the generalist will get destroyed.
Exactly.
You're going to have to niche down because it makes it harder. You're putting moats around your business. You're making extra barriers and layers of insulation for your business because you're a specialist. Yes, AI can give you a lot of unique details as far as data, but AI can't tell you the unique things and the actual personal experiences that you have because you live in that neighborhood, you know what's going on, and you've also sold like 30% of all the other people that are in this neighborhood. Like AI can't really tell you that.
100%, dude. And that I'm so glad you're going into this side of it, Chris, because that right there, like, that's what I want to see agents and investors step into. Yeah, it was years and years back when we really started to press in at Carrot. My companies, we started to press into the concept we call evergreen marketing now. It's like it's with the thought that you're always going to have a consumer seeking out a solution to their problem. So that's not going to go away, right? So sellers are always going to need to sell and buyers are going to need to buy. And unless somehow something happens where the government takes over and owns all the houses and private ownership is illegal, which I'm not going to say that would never happen, but I think it's a pretty low chance, right? Sellers are always going to need to sell and buyers are always going to need to buy. And so as long as they're seeking things out, becoming that local authority, right? When we bought our home on the river here, and I've told this story a number of times, we bought the home on the river. I'm friends with a lot of real estate agents, a lot of good ones. But I worked with the one that I know lives on the river. They have another property in the river. Her mom lives in the river and they know a lot about the river. They've sold a bunch of homes in the river. I'm like, I'm going to reach out to them because they know river properties really well and I don't. And they ended up catching one thing about our water system I never would have caught. And it saved us like 10 or 15 grand. So the expert, those local authorities, that's where I think agents are going to have to really step in and up that bar a little bit to say, where, like you said, where can I niche? Where can I be really, 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 really good at this thing? And then, I think create content, get out there and show people that authority and add value for free. And you're going to attract a bunch of people too who are willing to pay you for that, which is going to be really, really cool.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, agents are going to have to do a better job of
yep,
demonstrating their value, but communicating that. Full opinion here on like the
yep,
I guess macro short term, not much changes, but long term, lot changes, and there's other stuff brewing out there, other lawsuits and whatnot. The DOJ, I don't even know how this, how they're going to look at this thing.
yep,
That's different. And I think if they have the opportunity to make this actually even worse for agents if they want to,
yeah,
but I
yep,
digress.
mhm,
Ultimately, I think the agents that are doing their job today and they're adding a ton of value, they're actually going to make more money because they're
yep,
going to niche down even more. They're going to get smart. They're going to be agile. And all the people that are looking for the easy paycheck, they're the door openers, like the
yep,
ones that people really don't like, the ones looking for the easy money, and
mhm,
like they'll get out just because they won't be able to do that anymore. And
yeah.
it's just too expensive to hold the real estate license if you're not doing business.
Exactly. And dude, that's where I see a lot of opportunity for agents and investors, right? So as that industry heads into decline, right? What usually happens is an industry declines, but the new solution starts to then grow. It
Yeah.
it now goes into the new market, right? And so when we're looking at the real estate market, and this is something you've been doing for years, we've been driving the hybrid, we call it hybrid concept for years, which is you're an investor and an agent. In the decline phase, negative growth happens, meaning not negative growth with opportunity or revenue in the industry. It's negative growth of the number of people in the industry doing the
Yeah.
work, right? Excess capacity starts to happen where we saw some of that this last couple of years where you had so many agents. I don't remember what the number was. I'm going to completely make up a number here, Chris, but it was something like 1 million agents and 1.2 million properties for sale or something. It was something like that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. It was basically like it was a 1-to-1 or close
Yeah.
to it.
Yeah, so excess capacity starts to happen with the providers for that solution. High competition, shift, and then you need to shift to a higher value. So I feel that we are in that decline phase. Now, I don't know how far we are into the decline phase.
There'll
For
probably be some consolidation too. I
Yep,
heard that speculated on another podcast that some of the smaller brokerages. I don't know. Maybe Zillow buys some of them up. Maybe someone buys
mhm,
Zillow.
yep,
iBuyers too. Like the iBuyer, I don't think the iBuyer model is going away, but none of them are profitable.
yep,
Um,
exactly.
and I think Open Door might be the closest, and they're still hemorrhaging cash.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so I don't know. It's going to be interesting.
And that whole model is so fascinating, dude. Like, brushing on that a little bit there. One of the things that the local provider has to look at, whether you're an investor or an agent, we have to look at, well, why, what is the business model behind an open door, right? Because a lot of people are looking at that going, man, they're not going to be around for a while. They're hemorrhaging cash. The business model doesn't work. And they actually make most of their money not from the buy and the sell of the house. They make their money from the other services of the companies they've acquired or started. So from mortgages, from title, from a whole bunch of other things, warranty or basically the house warranties. There's a bunch of things that they're making money from in the back end, and so they can actually use house buying and house selling as the loss leader. Now they hope that it covers the cash, but as they go, what their bet is that that's a loss leader. They can take over the volume, just like what Uber has done. Uber is still hemorrhaging cash, but they're going, we want to just hit the market so deeply that we become the default source. And then we start to bake in all these other services behind. So now what do you have? You have Uber Eats, you have Uber deliveries, you have Uber everything, because now Uber got the market share. And now they're going to go, well, how do we actually make money with all this stuff that's happening? And I don't know if they've figured that out yet.
Yeah,
But
yeah. I do like that, Open Door, like the CEO, and I don't know if it's the same CEO now or if they've changed, but he was like, he would like to see the home buying process or the closing process to be like within days, not
yeah,
3 to 4 weeks. Like we're talking
I
three to
think
four
it will
days,
be.
which
I think it will be.
yeah, it's definitely possible, and AI
Mhm.
will definitely help that out. But it's going to take change and innovation and people with bold bold goals and willing to take risk.
Yep.
Do you
So
think this settlement's going to impact prices?
dude, it's a good question. I mean, here's my thought on whether the settlement's going to whether the settlement's going to impact prices. I think because there's been so much news about this that's came out. The headline, the soundbite that is everywhere, is something to the effect of this. That settlement comes out that eliminates buyer commission, right? That's basically the summary of what a lot of the things have said. Now, is that true? It's not true. Buyer agents can still make a commission, but I've even seen this and literally talked to a couple people who are selling or getting close to it. The words that they said is, shoot, cool, I don't got to pay a buyer's commission anymore. So I'm going to save 2 to 3%. And one agent that I talked to literally had a client call them and say, awesome, I don't need to pay a buyer's agent commission anymore. Or they demanded it. Hey, this now says I don't have to pay that. And so that's going to be interesting. And will that impact prices or not? I don't know. I don't know if this will impact prices, but
It's
I
never been
think
about that. Really, it's been I mean, the lawsuit was about seller net. Like, so
exactly,
if you want to look at the goal of the lawsuit, it wasn't about reducing prices. It was all about the sellers are being gouged
yep,
by having to pay the buyer's agent. So we want the sellers to make more money.
exactly, and that's going to happen. So I think that the agents are going to have to get creative, figuring out how do we add value, and you may end up finding this dynamic where agents start to kind of pick and choose what listings they look at based on the ones that are actually offering a commission. I think it's gonna be the Wild West again for the next 12 months. Everyone's trying
Yeah,
to
it'll
figure
be interesting,
this out.
and it'll get worked out as more data. I mean, the good agent. This is what listing agents. I mean,
Yep.
this is what I imagine they're going to do. Talk to the seller. Hey, Trevor, and you want to sell your house? And you're like, well, I don't want to pay a buyer's agent commission. Cool.
Mhm.
Hey, this is probably what's going to happen if you want to do that. Probably
Yep.
going to get some people that have buyer's agents. They're going to ask you to pay for it.
Hmm.
Like, do you want to do that? No? Okay, cool. Now, do you mind? This is what I would do if I was a listing agent.
Yep.
Do you mind if they just submit an offer anyway? Even just to, would you be interested even just seeing what it looks like?
Yep.
Well, probably not. Okay, cool. So now I get the call. Hey, are they offering buyer's agent commission? Um, no, but you go ahead and spend an offer.
Yep.
Just submit an offer. Let's see it.
Yeah.
Because as a seller, are you unwilling to pay a really, really strong offer that may have a
Yeah.
compensation versus other offers that have no compensation but a little bit weaker? I mean, at the end of the day, you're looking for a good offer. You've got a number in mind what you want to net
Yep.
and friction.
Yep.
So what other now the downside of that is, well, what if we get buyers that aren't qualified because they don't have an
Mhm.
agent, they haven't gone through all the rigmarole of the
Yep.
mortgage, mortgage pre-approval and all this other stuff, and we're like, okay, where's your pre-approval? What's that?
Yep.
Okay, we need to get you in contact with a loan officer. Oh no, 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 I know I make enough money. I just got a new job. I'm like,
Yeah.
hey, you just got a new job? Like, how were you employed before this? And I was like, no, actually, I was out of work for 6 months. I'm like, okay, well, these are all really important things when it comes to the loan qualification. Those where
Yep.
agents can add value. So I don't know.
Mhm.
The dynamic will get worked out. The
Yeah, it
marketplace will
will.
ultimately decide, and good agents will have that data to coach their clients
Yep.
appropriately.
And you may find, because I've even seen this, way before this settlement, where a seller's agent, if you're coming in as a buyer with no buyer agent representing you, they're either going to want to see if they can represent you, or they actually end up taking a bigger percentage of, they'll take that whole percentage and kind of represent you because they say the same thing. It's like, it's so much more work if I'm working with someone who isn't represented because I've got to do all this work now that the buyer's agent would
Yeah.
normally do. So
And they have to
they're
market it.
gonna
I mean,
still
part of
have them.
it, given the buyer agent commission, was,
Yep.
hey, I'm gonna have to spend this money to market the property, but hey, if you're actually going to do that work for me, then
Mhm.
cool, it's yours. So it's like the work still gets done.
Yep.
Um, so someone's doing it.
Yep. Dude, the one thing that pops to mind for me, and it's kind of my last thought on the topic for the day is where I feel that there will be things squeezed, and this does happen in that decline, of the industry or of that type of thing. And I don't want to say that this is a decline where it's like a decline could last decades, right? It could last a while, but it's a decline of the current way of doing things, oftentimes, right? And so what I think is probably going to happen is the real challenge that's been there for years. This is not new since the settlement is oftentimes, not every time. I talk to a lot of investors they're like, dude, I'll pay my 3% all day long to that agent to go sell the house. Like they just work it into it and they're pumped with that 3%. But you're going to find that in general, I think commissions are going to get squeezed a little bit more, because where the resistance oftentimes comes up is the average seller, average buyer looks at that agent making $45,000 in this thing, and they go, I don't think that they did $45,000 worth of work. Now, they don't know what they did. Oftentimes they just make an assumption that they didn't do $45,000 worth of work. So I think we are going to see the commission compressed a little bit over the next 5 years, 10 years. Is 6%, going to be the norm? Maybe it's 5% in
Yeah.
5 years.
And
Maybe
we've that's been going on. The average commission in the U.S. Last year was like a little over 5.5.
Yep.
And I heard in another podcast, I didn't look this up, but certain states it's actually in the fours, the average commission.
Yep.
So it's definitely there.
Yeah.
I think this will accelerate it.
Yep.
It's not going away. Like
No, it's
there's
not
still
going away.
work involved.
100%.
But
100%.
how do you think this is going to impact investors or wholesalers?
Yeah. So how this settlement's going to impact wholesalers and investors, I don't know specifically how that settlement is, but we've already been seeing regulations and laws passed the last 5, 6, 7 years that makes it harder to wholesale. Right? There's states that literally even prohibit it, and we've always been driving the what we call the hybrid model. Right? Investors should have a license and do it as a real estate consultant, and you offer that I can buy it or sell it, and you go in there and offer all the options. I think what's going to happen in general with agents and investors is you're going to have the consolidation happening, right? I think you're going to start to see the wholesaling trade be a little bit trickier over the next 5 to 10 years. You're going to have to operate a little bit more professionally. A little bit more of the fly by night people are probably not going to be in the market anymore, which I think is a good thing. That's a good thing. The investor
100%. I saw a short, like right before this, I saw a short. It was talking about all this, and it was like, but they were like arguing, like, why are these states doing this? And like, because grandma gets screwed when the wholesaler who doesn't have any money and ends up tying up their house, and now they get foreclosed on and wasting their time. Like, that's why.
Yep. That's why, and kind of part of my conjecture as well is, if you look at the spending in DC, right? It's always like the NAR is always one of the last few years anyway, has been one of the top 3 biggest lobbyists in DC, over pharma, which
NAR
is
and the NRA.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like when you look at it, NRA is way up there. NAR is like number 3, pharma's 4 or 5. And so I feel over the last decade, NAR has been seeing that industry being attacked from the wholesale side, from the iBuyer side. And they're going, oh my gosh, how do we protect this mature industry that we've built? And I think that's a big part of it, is because NAR has so much power and money on the lobbying side, which now is getting attacked right now, right? Which is really interesting, because they have so much money lobbying power there. They've been able to drive more of this change on the wholesale side. And I think we're just going to keep on seeing that until.
And I think that's low hanging fruit, because I mean, there's not really any. I mean, investors have a bad rap anyway from a PR standpoint. So when you talk about wholesaling, which is kind of the dirtiest of the investing world, and I agree with wholesaling. I'm just like most of them out there, it's pretty dirty. There are good wholesalers that do their job like legit, and but anyways, there's a lot of shadiness out there. So yeah, it's low hanging fruit for NAR to come up and say, hey, look, like they're doing brokerage without a license. It's just a loophole. Let's close that up.
Yep, I agree with you. I think in general, I think this is going to accelerate the drive towards once again what we call hybrid, doing both. You need to step in and say, I'm a real estate problem solver. I'm a real estate consultant. I've got the whole tool belt. I can make a cash offer. I can do a fix and list. Bring in a contractor and fix it and work with you on that. I can list it on the market. And we're just going to find, I feel, more and more of the one size fits all solution, but the person who can come in and truly solve any solution or any problem.
And there's an argument that the buyer's agent and the mortgage, like that ends up, because there are buyer's agents that have a mortgage license as well, but maybe that gets further fused together because they rely on each other so much, and being squeezed, it just may make more sense economically.
Dude, end of the day, agents and investors need to find ways to build what I call evergreen income, not just active income, right? So when you look at an agent and a wholesaler, that's the biggest thing for me, is like, it's a great way to make some transactional cash, but y'all, this is such an amazing time to go find and start to build your rental portfolio, start to build the evergreen income so you can get off that darn income hamster wheel. And that's what it's really about, because you didn't become an agent so you could look at houses for the next 40 years and feel like you got to work until you're 78. You didn't become a
100%.
wholesaler because you want to be trapped in a high-paying job. You did that because it's an amazing way to make money and interact with people. And now everybody needs to do what Chris is doing, and a lot of others, and start to go, now, how do I build a real, evergreen or passive income thing while I'm building wealth as well? Then you get the choice to say, I don't want to be an agent anymore. I've got this now, or I don't want to be a wholesaler anymore. Chris,
Yeah. I've been saying that for a while, and hats off to EXP for really pioneering a lot of the new revenue streams that agents have and enjoy today. Through revenue share and equity, and I do it through investing, and so, and really you should do it all. So hey, closing this out, ask the same 4 questions to everyone that comes on. If you could give advice to your 20-year-old self, what would that be?
Dude, I think the biggest thing for me is just enjoy mastering growing yourself as the reward, not on hitting the goals. I've hit a lot of big revenue goals, man, a lot of them. And I can tell you where the real squeeze is in the journey is waking up every day saying, how do I want to improve myself? And business is the best personal growth tool that I know of. And so it's not
definitely
about
trial by fire.
It is.
What book or books have greatly influenced your life?
Yeah, it depends on the phase. This phase right now, a lot of it's on identity. So, this past year, The Power to Change by Craig Groeschel, amazing book. If I were to go way back when, I'll give you one. When I was, this would have been 2011, 2012, before Carrot, it was The Pumpkin Plan by Mike Michalowicz. Simplest book in the world. Read 16 pages, shut it. And The Pumpkin Plan changed things for me after that.
Love it. In the last 5 years, what new belief, behavior, or habit has most improved your life?
Belief, behavior, or habit. That physical movement, and so I'll give it to this, you exhaust the body to tame the mind. It's like when you exhaust the body, tame the mind, it makes everything else easier in work and life. When we get into the cycle of busy, busy work and then distraction, busy work, distraction, busy work, distraction, that's nightmare. But exhaust the body, tame the mind, and everything else becomes easier and better.
How can people reach out to you?
Dude, Carrot.com is the company website, but then Instagram is probably the perfect spot. Just Trevor.Mauch, that's Mauch. Put all the stuff about growing businesses, entrepreneurship, my entrepreneur freedom formula, marketing, and getting leads as an investor agent. It's all over there.
Love it. Thanks, Trevor, for coming on. It's always a pleasure, and look forward to bumping into you again at one of these events.
Heck yeah, buddy. Thanks for having me on here, man. I'm pumped to see you and pumped to collab with you more here in the future.
Awesome. Take care. Thanks for tuning in. If you got any value out of this at all, please like, comment, subscribe, follow. I'd love to hear from you. And for more real estate related content, market observations, upcoming events, you can go to investedx.com and subscribe to our weekly newsletter. I promise you won't regret it. Thanks again.